A teenage girl steps out for a short hitchhike to her father's art studio and is never seen again. It was March 5, 1974, in Coconut Grove, Florida. 17-year-old Amy Billig was, by all accounts, an ordinary teenager with an artistic streak and a close-knit family. That afternoon, she decided to head over to her father's studio, just a couple of miles away. Hitchhiking wasn't unusual at the time. Many teenagers considered it a casual, almost harmless way to get around. But for Amy, that decision marked the last time anyone would ever see her. Witnesses later recalled spotting her near U.S. Route 1, a busy stretch of road that cuts through South Florida. After that, she simply vanished. No one saw her get into a car. No one saw her walk away. It was as though Amy disappeared into thin air. Almost immediately, rumors began to swirl. One of the earliest suspicions focused on a local motorcycle gang known as the Outlaws. The group had a reputation for violence, and whispers suggested Amy might have crossed their path at the wrong moment. The theory gained traction over the years, but no hard evidence ever tied the gang to her disappearance. What made the case even more chilling were the phone calls. Not long after Amy vanished, her family began receiving harassing calls, dozens of them over the years. Some came from anonymous men who taunted them with vague claims about Amy's fate. Others were traced back to prison inmates who seemed to be preying on the family's desperation. The calls were relentless, cruel, and left the Billigs trapped in an agonizing cycle of hope and despair. Adding to the torment were the countless alleged sightings. Amy was reportedly seen across the United States, and even as far away as London. Each sighting stirred renewed hope, but every lead eventually crumbled. None of them ever brought Amy home. As for theories, they remain speculative. Many investigators continue to point to the Outlaws motorcycle gang as the most likely culprits. Others believe Amy may have been trafficked, pulled into a hidden world from which she never returned. And some suggest she could have fallen victim to a random, opportunistic crime, an abduction with no witnesses and no trail to follow. Decades have passed, and the truth remains hidden. Amy's parents, Susan and Ned, spent their lives searching for answers, enduring every false lead and every cruel call. Tragically, both passed away without ever knowing what became of their daughter. Just as Amy vanished in broad daylight, another young woman would disappear years later in the heart of a bustling city. A college sophomore disappears in the middle of a crowded city, leaving not a single trace. 18-year-old Kristen Modafferi was bright, ambitious, and full of promise. Originally from North Carolina, she had taken a leap of independence, traveling across the country to spend her summer break in San Francisco. She enrolled in a photography course, picked up part-time work, and was excited to experience the culture of a new city. But within weeks of arriving, her adventure turned into one of the city's most haunting mysteries. On June 23, 1997, Kristen finished her shift at the Crocker Galleria Mall, where she worked at a coffee shop. She was last seen leaving the building, chatting with another young woman who has never been positively identified. Kristen had mentioned plans to attend a party that evening, but she never showed up. Days later, when her friends realized she hadn't returned, they grew alarmed. Her paycheck remained uncollected. Her personal belongings were left untouched. There was no sign that she had planned to leave on her own. What makes Kristen's disappearance especially unsettling are the details that don't quite add up. Surveillance footage confirms she left with an unidentified woman, fueling speculation about who this person was and whether she held the key to the mystery. Compounding the confusion were strange phone calls made in the days that followed. The calls were vague, cryptic, and never traced back to anyone who could explain them. Investigators explored multiple theories. One possibility is that Kristen fell victim to an abduction by a stranger she'd met in the city. Another centers on the so-called mystery woman, whose identity has never been firmly established. Was she a friend, a lure, or something more sinister? A darker theory points closer to home. Suspicions of foul play involving people connected to the house Kristen was renting a room in at the time. Yet none of these paths led to conclusive evidence. Her case remains one of San Francisco's most baffling disappearances. In the aftermath, the pain of Kristen's family helped lead to the creation of Kristen's Law, which provided federal support for searching missing adults between the ages of 18 and 21. But for her loved ones, that change in legislation could never replace what was lost. To this day, Kristen Modafferi lingers as a ghost of San Francisco, present in memory, but absent from the world. From the urban streets of San Francisco, Our next story takes us into the isolated forests of Alaska. A first date at a summer fair ends with a woman gone forever into the Alaskan wilderness. 24-year-old Erin Marie Gilbert had only recently moved to Alaska, looking to build a new chapter in her life. Bright, independent, and adventurous, she embraced the opportunities of her new home. On July 1, 1995, she agreed to go on a first date to the Girdwood Forest Fair, a lively local festival that combined music, crafts, and the close-knit feel of a small Alaskan community. It was meant to be a fun summer night, but it would be the last time anyone ever saw her. According to her date, they spent some time enjoying the fair before heading back to his car, which he claimed wouldn't start. He said he left Erin near the fairgrounds while he went to look for help. When he returned, she was gone. No one remembers seeing Erin leave, and she never made it home. What followed was a massive search effort. Teams scoured the area with dogs, helicopters hovered over the vast stretches of forest, and volunteers combed the festival grounds. Despite every effort, not a single trace of Erin was ever found. The wilderness surrounding Girdwood is beautiful but unforgiving, a maze of thick trees, mountains, and rivers that can swallow evidence in an instant. Adding to the unease were the inconsistencies in her date's account. Some of his statements didn't line up, and many have questioned whether his story of car trouble was the whole truth. Investigators never named him as a suspect, but suspicion has lingered for decades. Others believe Erin may have been abducted by a stranger. Festivals bring crowds, and in those crowded moments, it's not impossible for someone with bad intentions to act without drawing notice. Then there's the possibility, however remote, that Erin wandered into the forest on her own and met with an accident. But with no clues, no clothing, no personal items, no remains, the forest has yielded nothing. To this day, the fate of Erin Marie Gilbert is unknown. One moment she was a young woman at a summer fair, and the next she was gone, leaving behind only questions and grief. In the Alaskan night, Erin vanished as if the earth itself swallowed her whole. From the forests of Alaska, we move to the mountains of Montana, where a child's laughter was silenced forever. Where you are watching, comment, like, and subscribe for more. A child's family picnic turns into a nightmare when their 4-year-old simply walks into the woods and disappears. On June 25, 1983, the Marshall family was enjoying a summer outing in the Helena National Forest of Montana. It was a day meant for laughter, food, and time together beneath the tall pines. Little Nylene K. Marshall, just 4 years old, was playing near a trail with other children when she began to follow them into the trees. Within moments, she was gone. What should have been a joyful day became the beginning of every parent's worst fear. Search teams were quickly mobilized. Hundreds of volunteers, dogs, and helicopters swept the forest. They searched creeks, undergrowth, and miles of mountain terrain. Yet no trace of Nylene was ever found. It was as though the forest had swallowed her whole. For years, her disappearance stood as a tragic mystery with no clues to follow. But then, strange developments began to surface. Years after she vanished, the family received anonymous phone calls. The caller claimed to have taken Nylene and said he was raising her as his own. Soon after, letters arrived, disturbing, detailed notes that described how he was caring for her, what she liked, even intimate details that sounded like they could only come from someone truly living with her. Investigators traced the calls, but nothing conclusive came from them. The letters were equally frustrating. Some experts believed they were the work of a hoaxer, a cruel individual exploiting the family's grief for attention. Others feared the opposite, that they were genuine, written by someone who had managed to abduct Nylene and keep her hidden away from the world. The possibility that she was alive, living in secrecy, kept hope alive for her family, but it also deepened the torment of not knowing. To this day, Nylene's fate lies hidden in a chilling mix of silence and whispers. Decades earlier, another young girl would vanish during a family picnic, this time in Pennsylvania. Mother's Day 1938 began with flowers and joy, but ended with a family's 4-year-old gone without a trace. In McKean County, Pennsylvania, the West family spent the warm spring afternoon together in the countryside. 4-year-old Marjorie West, a lively little girl with bright red hair, played alongside her older sister while the family picked wildflowers in an open field. It was an ordinary, carefree moment. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Her sister turned her head for just a moment. When she looked back, Marjorie was gone. At first, it seemed impossible. She couldn't have wandered far. The family searched frantically, calling her name through the woods and meadows. But there was no answer. By nightfall, the entire community had mobilized. Hundreds of volunteers scoured the fields, forests, and nearby streams. Authorities organized one of the largest searches Pennsylvania had ever seen. Yet despite their desperate efforts, there were no footprints, no clothing, no sign of struggle, nothing to suggest where Marjorie had gone. As the days passed, rumors began to swirl. Some pointed to the possibility of a stranger passing through town, perhaps a traveling salesman, or someone simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others whispered about the darker possibility of local involvement, though no one was ever charged and no concrete evidence ever surfaced. The total lack of clues only deepened the mystery. In the end, all that was left were questions. How could a child vanish so quickly, in broad daylight, with so many people nearby? Was she taken by a stranger who disappeared with her into the countryside, or was something closer to home at play? Nearly a century later, Marjorie's disappearance remains one of Pennsylvania's greatest mysteries. From a vanished child, we now look at two missing teens whose discovery was far darker. Two teenage girls leave a mall, and their next chapter ends in horror. On December 16, 1978, 15-year-old Carrie Graham and her best friend, 14-year-old Francine Trimble, set out for a trip to the local mall in Forestville, California. It was the kind of outing countless teenagers made, especially just before the holidays. But that afternoon, the two girls never returned home. Their families were left to wonder if they had run away, met with trouble, or simply vanished into the unknown. For months, there were no answers. Then, in the summer of 1979, skeletal remains were found buried in a shallow grave in Mendocino County, more than 60 miles away. The discovery was grim. Two young people, their bodies bound with duct tape, their lives brutally cut short. But at the time, investigators couldn't match the remains to Carrie and Francine. Without modern tools, the bones were catalogued, stored, and eventually forgotten by all but the families still searching. Decades passed before science caught up. In 2015, DNA analysis finally confirmed what the families had long feared. The remains were those of Carrie Graham and Francine Trimble. After nearly 40 years of uncertainty, their identities were restored. But closure never came. The mystery only deepened with the confirmation. Who killed them? Why? Investigators have floated theories ranging from a serial offender operating in the area during the late 1970s to the possibility of someone closer to home, an acquaintance who had gained the girls' trust. Yet despite the time and attention given to the case, no one has ever been charged. Their killer remains at large. For the families, the tragedy is twofold. After decades of waiting, their daughters' names were finally given back to them, but justice was not. Their bones finally found names, but their killer still walks free. From Northern California, we head far offshore, where a young woman disappeared on open water. Imagine vanishing into thin air while aboard a cruise ship with your family. In March of 1998, 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley joined her parents and brother for what was supposed to be a carefree Caribbean vacation aboard Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas. The Bradleys were looking forward to the sun, the sea, and time together. But on the morning of March 24th, everything changed. At around 5:30 a.m., Amy's father checked on her. She was sitting on the cabin balcony, relaxed, looking out at the ocean. When he woke again just a short while later, Amy was gone. The family searched frantically around the ship, but there was no sign of her. Royal Caribbean conducted its own search, sweeping the vessel before it docked in Curaçao, yet the results were the same, nothing. From the very beginning, questions surrounded the circumstances of her disappearance. Amy was a strong swimmer and familiar with the water, making the theory of an accidental fall overboard less convincing to her family. Instead, attention shifted to more sinister possibilities. Over the years, reported sightings of Amy have surfaced across the Caribbean and Latin America. Witnesses claim to have seen her in brothels, sometimes under guard, unable to leave. In one chilling instance, a U.S. Navy officer reported seeing a woman resembling Amy in a Caribbean establishment, though when he tried to approach, she was quickly taken away. Even more disturbing was a photograph that emerged online of a woman, apparently held captive, whose resemblance to Amy was undeniable to her family. Theories have circled ever since. Many believe Amy was abducted from the ship and forced into human trafficking, taken into an underworld where she could not escape or be found. Others, though fewer, maintain the possibility of an accident, though the lack of evidence and the volume of alleged sightings makes that harder to accept. For Amy's family, the ordeal has been a nightmare without end. Every lead, every sighting, every photo offers hope, but also deepens the torment of not knowing. Amy's family continues the search, haunted by whispers that she may still be alive. Back on American soil, another teenage girl disappeared on what should have been a milestone day. Where you are watching, comment, like, and subscribe for more. The last day of school should have been a celebration, but for 17-year-old Alyssa, it was the last time anyone saw her. On May 17, 2001, Alyssa Turney finished her classes in Phoenix, Arizona, ready to begin summer break like any other teenager. But that afternoon, her life, and her family's, took a turn that remains shrouded in questions. According to her stepfather, Michael Turney, he picked Alyssa up from school, argued with her about house rules, and later returned home to find a note. The message said she was running away to California. At first, it seemed plausible. Teenagers threatened to run off, and Alyssa had even spoken about visiting California before. But almost immediately, things didn't add up. Her belongings, including her cell phone and money, were left behind. She hadn't told friends of any real plan, nor arranged transportation. To investigators, it seemed less like the decision of a runaway and more like a disappearance carefully disguised as one. In the years that followed, suspicion grew, centered on Michael Turney himself. His behavior was described as controlling, and his stories about that day contained troubling inconsistencies. Authorities eventually focused squarely on him. In 2020, nearly 2 decades after Alyssa vanished, Michael was arrested and charged with her murder. For Alyssa's sister, Sarah, who had tirelessly campaigned for justice, it felt like a turning point. But in 2023, the trial ended in acquittal. The prosecution could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that Michael was responsible. And so, Alyssa's case remains unresolved, her stepfather a free man, and her fate unknown. Theories persist. Some still wonder if she truly ran away, though the evidence against that possibility is overwhelming. For many, the darker conclusion feels more likely, that Alyssa was silenced by someone she trusted, and her truth hidden away forever. Alyssa's absence continues to cast a long, painful shadow over her family. And just 6 years earlier, a younger child vanished from a simple summer night at the ballpark. A summer baseball game turns into every parent's worst nightmare. On June 9, 1995, 6-year-old Morgan Nick joined her mother for a Little League baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. It was a warm evening, filled with the sound of bats cracking, kids laughing, and families gathered under the fading summer light. As the game went on, Morgan asked to play with friends near the parking lot, just a short distance away. Her mother agreed. After all, it was a safe, small-town setting. But within minutes, Morgan was gone. Panic spread quickly. Morgan's mother and others searched the field, the lot, and the surrounding area. Law enforcement was called immediately, and before long, the FBI joined the case. Despite the massive response, not a single solid clue surfaced that night. Witnesses came forward with troubling details. Some recalled seeing a suspicious man lingering near a red pickup truck parked close to where Morgan had been playing. The description was vague, and though investigators pursued the lead, the vehicle and its driver were never definitively identified. Over the years, countless tips poured in from across the country, each offering hope of a breakthrough. Yet time after time, those leads led nowhere. Theories about Morgan's fate remain rooted in the same grim possibilities. Many believe she was taken by a stranger in a calculated abduction. Others suggest a serial predator may have been responsible, possibly linking her case to unsolved crimes in nearby states. But with no physical evidence, no body, and no confirmed suspect, the truth remains elusive. What did emerge from the tragedy, however, was a legacy of action. In Arkansas, Morgan's case inspired the creation of the Morgan Nick Alert System, similar to an Amber Alert, designed to mobilize communities instantly when a child goes missing. It has since been credited with saving lives, but for Morgan's family, the system is a painful reminder of the little girl who never came home. Her case gave rise to the Morgan Nick Alert System, yet the little girl behind it remains missing. Finally, from small-town Arkansas, we turn to one of America's most infamous vanishings. One of the most powerful men in America walks into a restaurant and is never seen again. Jimmy Hoffa was no ordinary figure. As the president of the Teamsters Union, he wielded enormous influence over American labor and had deep connections to both politics and organized crime. By 1975, Hoffa was fighting to regain control of the Union after serving time in prison. But that fight would never reach its end. On July 30th of that year, Hoffa drove to the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. He told friends and family he was meeting with two known mob associates. Witnesses saw him waiting in the parking lot, pacing near his car. He looked impatient, checking his watch. And then, just like that, he was gone. What followed became one of the most famous mysteries in American history. The FBI launched extensive investigations. They dug up fields, searched landfills, and scoured construction sites rumored to hold his remains. Over the decades, the searches became almost legendary. Farmland in Michigan, a house in Detroit, even the concrete beneath Giant Stadium in New Jersey. Yet every search ended the same way, empty. Theories have swirled ever since. The most widely accepted is that Hoffa was murdered by the mob to prevent his return to power, a move that threatened the delicate balance of underworld politics. As for what happened to his body, speculation runs wild: buried in cement, destroyed in a car crusher, or dumped into a landfill where it would never be found. Each possibility adds to the legend, but none has ever been proven. Nearly 50 years later, Hoffa's fate is still a question mark, buried under decades of rumor, secrecy, and fear. And that's just the beginning. 40 more cases remain, each darker than the last. Where you are watching, comment, like, and subscribe for more.